Welcome to Old Testament History, Chapter 4, Session 12b, The Kingdoms and the Prophets Part 5. Ran and I are continuing our 1-2 punch, following the timeline of the split kingdom. Ran has been laying down the chronological, historical, and regal structure. I have been pursuing the subject of the primer on how to be a genuine prophet and speak for God. There are genuine prophets today that we can learn from, but also false ones we should be aware of and avoid imitating, and also gray area ones that float back and forth in between, like Balaam did. But the best training material is still the Word of God. Even back then, the genuine ones were outnumbered by the counterfeit, but despite the disparity in numbers, who won? That's why these details were put in the Bible. Editors from the schools of the prophets put together the books of Kings and Chronicles, like I covered last week, from their source material and included what God wanted said. Whether we have a modern institution of a school of the prophets in our ministry today or not, the Bible still is the textbook. So now we shall start where I left off in the last session, at the beginning of the reign of Azariah or Uzziah. Ren was saying he was one of the kings that had two names. Look at 2 Chronicles 26. 2 Chronicles 26:9. Moreover, Uzziah built towers in Jerusalem at the corner gate and at the valley gate, and at the turning of the wall, and fortified them. Now remember, the king of Israel had taken his father Amaziah captive, and broke down the large portion of the wall of Jerusalem. So here he is building them back. Verse 10, he also built towers in the desert, and digged many wells, for he had much cattle, both in the low country and in the plains, husbandmen also, and vine dressers in the mountains and in Carmel, for he loved husbandry. That's interesting. Verse 11, moreover, Uzziah had a host of fighting men that went out to war by bands, according to the number of their first account, by the hand of Jael the scribe, and Masaiah the ruler, under the hand of Hananiah, one of the king's captains. The whole number of the chief of the fathers of the mighty men of valor were 2,600, and under their hand was an army, 307,500, that made war with mighty power to help the king against the enemy. Verse 14, and Uzziah prepared for them throughout all the host shields and spears and helmets and armor and bows and slings to cast stones. And he made in Jerusalem engines invented by cunning men to be on the towers and upon the bulwarks, to shoot arrows and great stones withal, like catapults. And his name spread far abroad, for he was marvelously helped till he was strong. Verse 16, but when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction, for he transgressed against the Lord his God, and went into the temple of the Lord to burn incense upon the altar of incense. Now, success is good, but one must stay humble, because absolute power corrupts absolutely. And, while it was a good thing to reverse the embarrassments of his father, with Judah regaining some of his lost stature, he still somehow followed in his father's arrogant footsteps. Remember, Ren called him the arrogant king, the father. Maybe he retained some of the same advisors as his father, I'm not sure. Because he not only wanted to be the top man in the government, he craved absolute control And in order to do that, he desired to be the top man at the temple too, and burn incense. But this time it was not a prophet who confronted his error. It was the priest. And he was backed up by a troop of 80 more brave priests. Look at 2 Chronicles 26:17. And Azariah the priest went in after him, and with him 80 priests of the Lord that were valiant men, and they withstood Uzziah the king, and said unto him, It appertaineth not to you, Uzziah, to burn incense unto the Lord, but to the priests, the sons of Aaron. See, the man who burnt incense directed all the prayers. That was that one job that Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist, had when he had the vision of the angel. That job was the most coveted job of all of the jobs that were divided by lot in the temple, because at that point, that man was the object of the attention of the entire crowd at the temple, because he was directing the prayers during the burning of incense. So this was a very important job, and that's what the king wanted to do. But he was not a priest. That was not for him to do. So they said, the priests, the sons of Aaron, they're consecrated to burn incense. Get out of the sanctuary, for you've trespassed. Neither shall it be for your honor from the Lord God. But verse 19, Uzziah was angry, and he had a censer in his hand to burn incense. And while he was wroth with the priests, the leprosy even rose up in his forehead before the priests in the house of the Lord from beside the incense altar. Wow. Verse 20, and Azariah the chief priest and all the priests looked upon him, and behold, he was leprous in his forehead. And they thrust him out from thence. Yea, himself hasted also to go out, because the Lord had smitten him. Verse 21, and Uzziah the king was a leper unto this day, unto the day of his death, and dwelt in a several house, being a leper, for he was cut off from the house of the Lord. And Jotham his son was over the king's house, judging the people of the land. Now, that is a very clear documentation of the co-reigns that Ren was talking about. During the reign of Uzziah, or Azariah, as he's called in 2 Kings, there were 6 kings in Israel: Jeroboam II, Zechariah, Shallum, Menahem, Pekahiah, and Pekah. Maybe their son was Peekaboo. I don't know. I used to work for an international sports marketing company in the IT department, and Peekaboo Street was our client. This is a true story. So I told the folks at our Colorado office to tell Peekaboo that there was a rumor that she had donated to build a whole floor at a hospital, and it was called the Peekaboo ICU. I heard back, she enjoyed that. Anyway, 2 Chronicles 26:22. Now the rest of the acts of Uzziah, first and last, did Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, write. So that fits in what Brent was teaching. Now, it says that Isaiah was the son of Amos. Now, was this Amos the prophet? Amos and Isaiah prophesied about the same time, and in English, both Amos and Amos are spelled similarly, but in Hebrew they are not. Amos the prophet is spelled Ayin, Mem, Vav, Samek, while Amos, Isaiah's father, is spelled Aleph, Mem, Vav, Sadeh. So, different fathers. However, there was another prophet before Isaiah and after Amos, to which we now turn, and that is the prophet Hosea. By the mercy of God, my life has been spared to allow me to share with you my life's work in biblical research. And I'm doing so in hopes that those who follow won't have to retrace my steps of discovery and my mistakes, but instead learn and then build upon what I've founded. That's why I'm offering my work free of charge, no strings attached, to any believer in any ministry. My path with discovery has had many stepping stones along the way. Epiphanies, which were lessons I learned, not only involving gaining key pivotal knowledge, but also learning important methods of analysis that unlock biblical truths and insight. But the most basic of all lessons I've learned is, I believe that I can figure things out. I believe that somehow God can provide me with the keys that opened up the treasures contained in the Bible so I can teach them, and all may be benefited, healed, and enthralled by God's goodness, magnitude, and love. During my career, I've especially learned about the importance of biblical concurrence, how multiple examples of the same things teach comprehensive truth. That is the benefit of word studies. And then what I call signpost words. Those are families of associated words surrounding every subject in the Bible, which, when all surveyed, will build scope and point to all the passages on that subject. Next is repetitions, which, when present, are the ancient ways of controlling and protecting and structuring content and granting thus saith the Lord authority. I think it's amazing how the books of Ecclesiastes, Jonah, and Amos that we have covered opened up to us when we followed the clues signaled by the phrase repetitions. Also, I've learned practical things, like when I was finally delivered of the arrogant attitude I learned from my former associations, that we knew so much, so we must be really important, and consequently everyone else is inferior. Well, whoa, Nelly. I'm so grateful for realizing that the body of Christ is much grander than we ever imagined, and the Lord is at work all over the world in many ministries, and that it's unwise to despise or meddle in His work. Love is much more effective than fear. So we're now ready to open Hosea, and I have not found the same kind of phrase repetitions that unlock those other books. Well, no worries. Remember, I've taught that when present, the phrase repetitions control, but they are not used in Hosea. But I knew there was greatness to be discovered, and so it is. The Bible is the greatest literature of all time, and it reserves the right to utilize all the modes of expression and genre of literature, except maybe fiction, to portray its lessons. Each book of the Bible does have a purpose, which I believe can be discerned and communicated for the benefit of the meek to learn and to be helped and to have a better relationship with God. Therefore, one way or another, I believe we can find the keys to unlock the riches which we know must be there. But I'm not the smartest person in the world. I think a certain way. I only have one of the 16 personality types. I don't have multiple personalities. All right? So when I initially can't figure stuff out, I ask questions, I consult others' works. So that's what I did with Hosea. And the consensus among biblical scholars is that the book of Hosea is Hebrew poetry. So I looked at it from that perspective, and that's when it began to open up. Now, our exposure to Hebrew poetry has been through the work of E.W. Bullinger. He expanded on the work of Bishop Robert Loth, L-O-W-T-H, showing that Hebrew poetry rhymes in idea. But more work on poetry has been done since Bullinger, who lived around the turn of the 20th century. I found a good summary of all the forms which I'll give you a PDF for. And that was done by Bible Lessons International. And since Bullinger, Charles Briggs and George Buchanan Gray developed the subject more. They utilize some different terminology for the same things which I've taught. What Bullinger calls correspondence, they call synonymous. What Bullinger calls opposite, they call antithetical. What Bullinger calls introversion, they call chiasmic. But it adds a few more categories. So I'll give you that PDF. But the instructions at the end are really good, and I'm going to read those to you. So it's in a section called Guideline to Interpreting Hebrew Poetry. And they say, A, look for the central truth of the stanza or strophe. Strophe is like a paragraph or in prose. The Revised Standard Version was the first modern translation to identify poetry by stanzas. And so they say compare modern translations for helpful insights. And now this is what we've done by using the structure to pinpoint the central truth, what I call the punchline from the other sessions. Then they say B. So we had A, here's B. Identify the figurative language and express it in prose. So try to convert the figures into literal so you understand them. Remember, this type of literature is very compact. Much is left for the reader to fill in. That's really a neat way to put it. This is where we filled in the blanks by our understanding of biblical culture. Hebrew poetry is concentrated, sagacious. You got to think to put it together. So now here's C, their third point. Be sure to relate the longer issue-oriented poems to their literary context, often the whole book, and the historical setting. Try to express the central truth in your own words. And we've utilized our knowledge of the timeline from Wren's sharings to put things in context. Then they have an interesting D point, fourth point. They say, Judges 4 and 5 are very helpful in seeing how poetry expresses history. Judges 4 is prose. Judges 5 is poetry of the same event. They say also compare Exodus 14 and 15. And then their fifth point, E, attempt to identify the type of parallelism involved, whether synonymous, antithetical, or synthetic. This is very important. And we've done this too. Once you identify the type of parallelism, then we can compare and contrast the matching lines back and forth like I've instructed and gain the insight therein. So let's turn to Hosea. We're going to look at Hosea tonight. Hosea, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea. So Wren read a little bit of Hosea 1, but we'll go over it again. Hosea chapter 1, verse 1. The word of the Lord came unto Hosea, the son of Beeri, in the days of all those kings, Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. Wren told us it was 46 years. The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. And the Lord said to Hosea, Go take unto you a wife of whoredoms, and the children of whoredoms, for the land committed great whoredom, departing from the Lord. Oh, wow. How would you like to be Hosea and God told you to do that? God told him to marry a Playboy model Yeah, right. You'd have to be really sure about that, Rebbe. Okay. Is it really God telling you to do that? Ooh. But anyway, verse 3. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, which conceived and bare him a son. One of the scholars I was reading, it was a woman, and she said, what were they thinking when they named her Gomer? Anyway, verse 4. And the Lord said unto him, name the child Jezreel, for yet a little while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel. Ren showed us about Jezreel. And verse 5, it'll come to pass at that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. And Jezreel has two meanings. It means to scatter and to sow. And these are going to come up later in the book of Hosea. Verse 6, she conceived again and bare a daughter, and God said unto him, call her name Lorumah, for I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. Verse 7, but I will have mercy upon the house of Judah, and will save them by the Lord their God, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword, nor by battle, by horses, or by horsemen. Verse 8, when she had weaned Lorumah, she conceived and bare a son. And then said God, call his name Lo-Ami, for you are not my people, and I will not be your God. Now, Ren explained about the Jezreel being Naboth's field that Ahab had coveted, and Jezebel had Naboth killed so Ahab could have it. That's where Ahab died. And it's where Jehu killed Jehoram. It's where Jezebel's body was eaten by dogs. And it's where all the heads of Ahab's 70 sons were put. So Jezreel was a place of judgment. Lo-Ruhamah means not having obtained mercy. Lo-Ami means not my people. Those were strange names for kids, but it was a prophetic device. We're going to see this in a moment. We know the impact of not my people because we tracked my people through the word. That was radical, though, those names. God told the prophet to marry a prostitute, name his children those names. This type of prophecy is where a prophet uses an object or a prop to demonstrate or illustrate a prophecy, like when Ahijah took Jeroboam's new coat and tore it into 12 pieces, or Agabus took the Apostle Paul's girdle and tied himself up with it. But this is a unique version of that in which the quote-unquote props are people, a wife and children. But this is an illustration of what God had done with Israel. God was illustrating that he was married to Israel, and Israel was like a prostitute. It's very vivid. But now in Hosea chapter 1, look at the next three verses. Hosea chapter 1, verse 10. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, you are not my people, there shall be said unto them, you are the sons of the living God. Then shall the children of Judah and the children of Israel be gathered together, and appoint themselves one head, and they shall come up out of the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel. So that's the other meaning of Jezreel, to scatter or sow are the two meanings there. Chapter 2, verse 1, say ye unto your brethren, Ami, and to your sisters, Rumah. So, these three verses are a complete reversal of the first 9 verses of Hosea. Instead of Lo-Ami, not my people, they're going to be called the sons of God, and Ami, my people. And instead of Lor-Huama, not obtaining mercy, they will be Ruhama, obtaining mercy. And instead of Jezreel being a place of judgment, it'll be where the end times prophecy is fulfilled. Now, that's confusing, that reversal. What does it mean? The next section of Hosea features a similar back and forth reversal. All right? But in the next section of Hosea, God is talking in the first person. While the first section wasn't highly structured, the second section is highly structured and is in the form of Hebrew poetry. And there's something in there, a new kind of rhythm that we have not seen before. It's a repetition intensifier. Hebrew poetry in Hosea. This is a handout I'm going to give to you. This is the first part, verse 1 through 9. Then the second part is, I call it reversal number 1, is Hosea chapter 1, verse 10, 11, and 12. Now we're going to get down into section 2, and it's highly structured with Hebrew poetry. So I'm going to go over this with you. Hosea chapter 2, verse 2. Plead with your mother, plead, for she is not my wife, neither am I her husband. So there you have A and A, where wife and husband are opposite. You see? Then it goes on to say, let her therefore put away her whoredoms out of her sight, and her adulteries from between her breasts. Now, whoredoms and adulteries are parallel. Sight, your eyes, are indicative in Hebrew culture of your mind, what you think, what you look at. And then between her breasts, that's where your heart is. So you see mind and heart. So that's B and B in Hebrew poetry. Those are synonymous. Chapter 2, verse 3. Lest I strip her naked and set her as in the day that she was born. That's C and C synonymous. And make her as a wilderness and set her as a dry land. That's D and D synonymous. But then, the next line at the end of verse 3 says, and slay her with thirst. So wilderness, dry land, thirst. There's 3 of them there. And this is like an intensified, slay her with thirst is more intense than a dry land or a wilderness. So it takes the D and intensifies it. This is that new pattern that I'm telling you we haven't seen before. All right? This will show up over and over again here in Hosea. So that's why I'm bringing it to your attention. Verse 4. And I will not have mercy upon her children, for they be the children of whoredoms. That's E and F. For their mother hath played the harlot, she that conceived them. So that is playing the harlot is a new concept. She that conceived them, that's synonymous with earlier, they be the children of whoredoms. All right? And she hath done shamefully. That's a G, synonymous with played the harlot. And now we go down and bring up some more. This is Hebrew poetry, where it rhymes not in sound, but an idea. For she said, I will go after my lovers. All the way down at the end of verse 7 is another one that corresponds with this, and also the beginning of verse 7. And she shall follow after her lovers. So I will go after my lovers, follow after her lovers, and then later on I will go and return to my first husband. You see how those all go together? Then, in between there, that give me my bread and my water and my wool and my flax, mine oil and my drink. That's a J. That'll come up later. Verse 6, behold, I will hedge up thy ways with thorns. That is like not having mercy on her children at the beginning of verse 4. That's the E. Then, and make a wall that she shall not find her paths. That also is a judgment. That's an intensified E. Then, and she shall follow after her lovers, but she shall not overtake them. That's a K. She shall seek them. That's, she's following after her lovers. She's trying to find them. That's an I. But she shall not find them. That's fitting with not overtake them. That's a K. You see the patterns here? All right, now let's keep going. Verse 8. For she did not know that I gave her corn and wine and oil and multiplied her silver and gold. You see how that J is synonymous with the J at the end of verse 5. Give me my bread and my water and my wool and my flax, my oil and my drink. See? So this is highly structured here. You can see the poetry. We're used to things being a little bit more structured, like in Psalms and Proverbs, where there's an A, B, C, C, B, A, or A, B, that kind of thing. It can be very clear that you can see the relationship, but still, it's clear here too, but it's more free form. But there's still rhymes and idea. So, verse 8, she did not know I gave her corn and wine and oil and multiplied her silver and gold, which they prepared for Baal. Now that was a shock because God gave all these wonderful things, but they turned around and gave it to Baal. So that's an M for a religious purpose. That'll come up later. Therefore will I return and take away my corn in the time and my wine in the season thereof, and will recover my wool and my flax, given to cover her nakedness. See, now that's a J, and it's intensified. A third J, but it's intense. I'll take them all away. Then, verse 10. And now I will discover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers. So, they were seeking to find the lovers. Here, they're discovered. So that's an opposite kind of K. And none shall deliver her out of mine hand. That's an intensified E. You're going to have this in a handout, so you'll be able to follow it in your study. Verse 11, I will also cause all her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and all her solemn feasts. That is a religious thing that corresponds to what they gave for Baal, but it is an opposite. All right? Now we keep going here. Chapter 2, verse 12. And I will destroy her vines and her fig trees, whereof she has said, these are my rewards and my lovers have given me. That's an opposite to the corn and the wine and all the provisions that they got. And I will make them a forest, and the beasts of the field shall eat them. That's a new idea. I gave it an N. And then it says, I will visit upon her the days of Balaam, wherein she burned incense to them. That's an M, a religious, and it's an intensified thing. I'm going to visit upon her for all that stuff. And then the last part of verse 13, and she decked herself with her earrings and her jewels, and she went after her lovers and forgot me, saith the Lord. So she went after her lovers. That's synonymous with the I. Now, so all those things in this section here are really negative. And then we get to verse 14. And again, we have a reversal of all of that. Therefore, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak comfortably unto her. Well, allure and speak comfortably are A's. They're synonymous. Verse 15, and I will give her her vineyards from thence. Wilderness and vineyards are opposites. Those are B's. And the valley of Achor. Now, this is where we need to know some geography. We need to know some things that we were talking about at the beginning before the teaching. One of the believers had a book of Jewish background and culture, like a Bible dictionary, and it talks about all the different geography and stuff. Well, here we need to know, what is the Valley of Achor? Well, remember when Jericho was taken, and they said, do not take any booty from Jericho. Destroy everything. Well, there was one believer that didn't obey. His name was Achan, and they found out that he had done this, and so they stoned Achan, and they covered him up with a pile of stones, and that was in the Valley of Achor. So, wilderness, vineyards, and Achor go together. I will give her vineyards from thence, and the Valley of Achor. So, this is an opposite of where a curse was to Achan. See how that fits? That's an intense B. Now, then it says, for a door of hope. Well, that's a real turnaround. And she shall sing there. Those are C's, hope and sing go together. As in the days of her youth, that's a D. As in the day when she came up out of the land of Egypt. That was a kind of a beginning for the children of Israel. That's a D, a synonymous one. See how this works? Verse 16, and it shall be at that day, saith the Lord, that thou shalt call me Ishi, my husband, and thou shalt call me no more Baali, my Lord. Verse 17, for I will take away the names of Baalim out of her mouth. See how that's an opposite of Baali? And they shall no more be remembered by their name. Okay? So see how this fits? Very interesting. And in that day, that's a repeat of in that day earlier, I will make a covenant for them. Well, that's an intensified door of hope, sing. A covenant's even better than that. So that's a C. With the beasts of the field, with the fowls of heaven, with the creeping things of the ground. That's an intensified wilderness. That's a C. All right? And I will break the bow and the sword and the battle out of the earth, and will make them to lie down safely. Now, this is a real intense C. All right? Door of hope, sing, break the bow, sword of the battle of the earth, make them lie down in safety. So, now, then it changes form. And whenever it changes form, if you understand how everything works, a change of form draws your attention. So now it's going to switch from poetry into repetitions. Verse 19, and I will betroth thee unto me forever. I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness and in judgment and in loving kindness and in mercies. And I will even betroth thee unto me in faithfulness. You see how this is totally opposite all those other things earlier? It's a reversal. Isn't that amazing? And thou shalt know the Lord. That's a conclusion after the first set of repetitions. Now here's another set of repetitions. Here is used 5 times. And it shall come to pass in that day, I will hear, saith the Lord. I will hear the heavens, and they shall hear the earth. And the earth shall hear the corn, and the wine, and the oil, and they shall hear Jezreel. Wow. So here this repetition now is echoing elements from the poetry. Isn't that beautiful? Hear the corn, the wine, and the oil. And Jezreel comes up. And look at verse 23. And I will sow her unto me in the earth. That goes right back to the other meaning of Jezreel, because it means scattering or sowing. Isn't that interesting? Verse 23, the second part, and I will have mercy upon her that have not obtained mercy, and I will say to them that were not my people, you are my people. And they shall say, thou art my God. So that's a conclusion with great emphasis. See, isn't that interesting? To see how that all fits? Now, the reversal echoed back. So this is highly structured Hebrew poetry, full of synonymous and opposite statements, with those crescendos and echoes back to the beginning of the book. Isn't that beautiful? This is Hebrew poetry. See, everything is now beautifully and poetically reversed. And that is the pattern throughout the book of Hosea. God loved Israel. They were His people. God loves us too. And God's love doesn't change. It's a relentless devotion, and there's nothing we can do to make Him stop. He decided, and that settles it. But Israel betrayed Him, and there will be consequences, but because of His love, there is a day coming when everything shall be reversed, and those who make it into the resurrection of the just shall be betrothed forever. Come back to me. I love you. Come back to me. I've never stopped loving you. Come back to me, my love. And that is why the word love shows up in a greater concentration in Hosea than in any other book of the Old Testament. There are more occurrences of love in Deuteronomy and Psalms, but those are much larger books. So it's a greater concentration in the smaller book of Hosea. Isn't that beautiful? Now, we're going to look at the next section. Here is section number 3. And you have a negative side and then a reversal. Chapter 3, verse 1. Then said the Lord unto me, Go yet, love a woman beloved of her friend, yet an adulteress, according to the love of the Lord, toward the children of Israel, who look to other gods, and love flagons of wine. So I bought her to me for 15 pieces of silver, and for a homer of barley, and half a homer of barley. And I said to her, You shall abide for me many days, and thou shalt not play the harlot, and thou shalt not be for another man, so will I also be for thee. Verse 4, For the children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, without a prince, without a sacrifice, without an image, without an ephod, and without a teraphim. Verse 5, Afterward shall the children of Israel return and seek the Lord their God, and David their king, and shall fear the Lord and His goodness in the latter days. So, this is another kind of prophecy in this section where the prophet acts out an illustration. In this case, the prophet bought the services of a prostitute for a large sum, but then said she would abide by him many days, and she should not be for another man. That is, she wouldn't be allowed to ply her trade. But it also says, and so also the prophet would be for her. So in other words, he bought her services for an extended period of time, but didn't touch her, in order to illustrate verse 4. The children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, without a prince, without a sacrifice, and without an image, without an ephod, and without teraphim. You know what? That prophecy, those quote-unquote many days, are still going on today because of the explanation in verse 5. And afterward shall the children of Israel return, seek the Lord their God, and David their king, and shall fear the Lord and His goodness. When? In the latter days. So David the king and all that, that's referring to the millennial kingdom, which is still future. So the quote-unquote many days includes now. Now, still didn't know about the mystery, That wasn't expressed there, but it's hidden in between the lines. But in that time, after the resurrection of the just, they shall be delivered in fellowship with God. So, another way of looking at this book is layering all the negative parts together and layering all the positive parts together, because the positive parts are foretelling of the end times. And so, wow. So you have 3 prophecies and reversals so far. This is the 3rd section and the 3rd reversal. Now we go down here to section number 4. Now, section number 4 is really deep. Chapter 4, verse 1. Hear the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel, for the Lord hath a dispute with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break forth, and blood touches upon blood. In other words, murder follows murder. Wow. Now, this next section contains information that most scholars don't have a clue about. I mean, it's wonderful to be able to study Scripture on an intellectual level and see the literary beauty that's there and revel in the sagacious jewels revealed by the nuances of Hebrew poetry. But there actually is a much deeper spiritual side here regarding idolatry that is unveiled. In chapter 4, verse 12, it unmasks the real culprit. It's called the spirit of whoredoms. Many scholars are uninformed or misinformed of the spiritual world, but we are aware of the titanic struggles that go on beneath the surface in the dimension beyond ours. There are angels working for the true God there, protecting and fighting. But who are they fighting? They're fighting the devil's fallen angels. Jesus said those exist. I'm not going to pick and choose which sayings of Jesus I believe and which ones I won't. He said there are devil spirits. We got a glimpse in 2 Chronicles 18 in the revelation spoken to Jehoshaphat. Remember, Micaiah told of one lying spirit from the left hand, the hand of cursing, that affected all 400 false prophets. One spirit, 400 prophets. So here in Hosea 4, we get another chilling glimpse into the spirit realm. This is the spirit of whoredom. It has nothing to do with prostitution. It is referring to spiritual whoredom, idolatry. 1 Corinthians 6 calls it fornication, spiritual fornication. It is a whoring after other gods. And that is the number one no-no in God's book. So even though this passage is written in Hebrew poetry, like chapter 2, and you can see it peeking through, I'm just going to teach the spiritual side tonight of this chapter 4 for the sake of simplicity and clarity. You can go back and see the poetic synonyms and opposites in second pass if you'd like. But now that you know what to look for, that should be doable. But when one reads Hosea 4 with spiritual eyes, it reveals insight into this foul spirit. The spirit of whoredom is a quote-unquote gateway spirit. That is, it is an entry-level enticement that once entered upon leads to deeper evil and depravity. If allowed to operate, it brings severe consequences in people's lives, and so that is what chapter 4 is really talking about. Verse 1, hear the word of the Lord, you children of Israel, for the Lord hath a dispute with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. Once an idolatry spirit is allowed to operate in people's lives, they can no longer discern truth from error, nor mercy from judgment, and are closed off from receiving knowledge from the true God, because the gateway spirit functions as a conduit from hell to bring in a host of other terrible spiritual friends that lead to verse 2. By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break forth, and blood touches blood. Murder follows murder. Ren talked about the civil wars, the 4 civil wars. That's why. Insurrection and internal violence, he called it. Devil spirits of all kinds are introduced through this gateway and rack and ruin people's lives. That's why one of the jobs of pastors and teachers and other ministers is to keep them out. So I'm doing my job tonight. Some other entry-level spirits, like the spirit of whoredom, are the spirit of Python, which is false prophecy, a sensual spirit, which is sexual and homosexual spirits, and drug and alcohol addiction. Once these introductory gateway spirits are introduced into a person's life, other spiritual problems ensue. So how are they kept out? By teaching and believing God's Word. That's how you keep spirits out. They can't stand the truth. You have the truth in your mind, and if you do it, you're protected. The Word of God does that. This infestation was happening on a wholesale scale in the northern kingdom. Verse 3, therefore shall the land mourn, and everyone that dwells therein shall be languish or waste away, with the beasts of the field and with the fowls of heaven. Yea, the fishes of the sea shall also be taken away. Beasts and fowls are devil spirit terms, and fish of the sea, we learned in the celestial gospel, stands for blessings, and blessings will be taken away. In Leviticus 18, it lists a whole string of abominations that Israel was forbidden to do. And then in Leviticus 18, it declares the following. Leviticus 18:24. Defile not yourselves in any of these things, for in all these nations that are defiled, which I cast out before you, and the land is defiled. Therefore I do visit the iniquity thereof upon it, and the land itself vomiteth out her inhabitants. Ye shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not commit any of these abominations, neither shall any of your own nation, nor any stranger that sojourns among you. For all these abominations have the men of the land done in Canaan, which were before you. And the land's defiled, that the land spew not you out also when you defiled it, as it spewed out the nations that were before you. That's why, verse 3, the land mourned. All right? The consequence is the land will become defiled and become unproductive, which is exactly what verse 3 refers to. Now, the next few verses here in Hosea 4 deal with priests. That word occurs, priest, in verse 4, 6, and 9. The priests were supposed to be the equivalent of pastors to look after God's people. They were supposed to be the first line of defense against the inroads of the gateway spirit of whoredom, idolatry, and the other gateway ones. But they were not doing their job. The priests were supposed to be the ones reproving and defending. But verse 4 has some strange language. Hosea 4:4. Yet let no man strive, nor reprove another, for thy people are as they that strive or quarrel with the priest. Now, normally one would think that there should be no prohibition for one person to reprove another, because normally reproof is for correcting someone towards the right. However, if the populace is infested with devil spirits to the point where there is so much swearing and lying and killing and stealing, as verse 2 said, this contention and quarreling is nothing but squabbling amongst devil spirits, as they are known to do. So, boy, this really, Hosea, he knew what was going on. Accordingly, there is an alternate reading for the last half of verse 4 that is cited in Brown Driver Briggs, and they render it, thy people have rebelled against me, O priest. Well, if that's the case, which I'm leaning in the direction of, then verses 5 through 9 make more sense, because the repetition of the word priest is referring to false priests, because that's all there were in the northern kingdom. Jeroboam had kicked out all the genuine ones. Mosaic Judaism was not being practiced there anyway. It was the alternate religion of Jeroboam, which was idolatry. So then, in that case, thy mother, in verse 5, is derogatorily referring to the ones that the false priests were followers of. See, the genuine, and this came up in the meeting before we started, the genuine who taught them would be referred as their father if it was genuine, but they weren't, so it's the mother. And then the children in verse 6 would be the ones who followed the false priest teachings. Now, for years, we have cited only the first part of verse 6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. But we have not kept it in context. In context, it is much deeper, as an indictment of the priests, the teachers who have succumbed to idolatry and deprived their people of the right knowledge of God. Let's read the whole thing in context. Verse 5, therefore shalt thou, the false priest, fall in the day, and the prophet also shall fall with thee, the priest, in the night, and I will destroy thy mother. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, because thou, the false priest, hast rejected knowledge. I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no more what? Priest to me. See what it's really saying? Seeing thou hast forgotten or ignored the law of thy God, I will also ignore thy children, those who follow the priest's teachings. And they were increased, so they sinned against me. The interlinear says, the more they increased, the more they sinned. So the increasing is in false teaching. Therefore will I change their glory into shame. They eat up the sin of my people. They set their heart on their iniquity. And there shall be like people, like priests, and I will punish them for their ways and reward them their doings. Wow. Read that in context. Now we understand verse 6. Now, there's a very telling note in the REV Bible on verse 8. The they, there in verse 8, they eat up the sin of my people, and they set their heart on their iniquity. The they, in the context, are the false priests. And eat up means feed upon. That is, the priests ate the meat of their sin offerings. Here's a quote from the REV commentary. Quote, we learn from Hosea 1:1 that Hosea wrote at the very end of the kingdom of Israel, after which it was conquered and deported by the king of Assyria. At the time of Hosea, the political and priestly system of the kingdom of Israel was very corrupt. In fact, the whole priestly system in the kingdom of Israel had started with priests who were not from Aaron, who led the worship of golden calves. Remember, they were called from the lowest of the people. The priests in the kingdom of Judah were corrupt as well. The second stanza of the verse, and set their heart on their iniquity, shows that the priests enjoyed eating the rich meat of the various offerings and thus had no real incentive to work to help the people to overcome their sin. The more the people sinned, the more food the priests got to eat. God originally gave the priests a share of some of the sacrifices. We covered that before in some other sessions, as a reward for their labor. But now the priests had perverted the system and were happy when people sinned. That the priests got to regularly eat meat already put them in a very privileged position in biblical culture, because it was not common in those days for people to eat meat for a number of reasons. Most people were poor. There was no way to reliably preserve the meat, and much of the meat that was eaten was of poor quality. Proverbs 7:14 gives us some insight into how attractive good meat could be in the biblical culture and how it could be used to help lure people into sin. The priests got the best meat in the land because the animals had been offered to God, but they were not thankful for that and instead looked forward to people sinning so they could have more. Unquote. Wow. Verse 10. For they shall eat and not have enough, and they shall commit whoredom and shall not increase, because they have left off to take heed to the Lord. Whoredom and wine and new wine take away the heart. Wow. False teaching never satisfies. It does not produce results. The spirit of whoredom is like drunkenness, which debilitates and destroys one's ability to understand. When my wife and I were researching the one body of Christ and discovering things about the great mystery, we had a Christian couple who lived across the street from us. And so we shared some of the exciting things we were learning. And there was no response from them at all. It was like we were talking to a wooden post. Wow, that's what talking to idolaters is like. My people ask counsel at their stocks, verse 12, and their staff declares unto them, for the spirit of whoredoms hath caused them to err, and they have gone a-whoring from under their God. So, the spirit of whoredom or idolatry then reinforces itself with false advice or false prophecy. So no wonder I'm talking about prophecy and trying to make sure we understand what's right and what's not. Especially personal prophecy. That's risky. All right? I talk about prophets trying to tell everyone what to do all the time. Well, is that really the role today when all of us now have spirit? I think God's big enough to tell born-again Christians what to do because we have spirit. So a good prophet will help believers see what God's already been trying to tell them instead of telling them what to do all the time. See? Now, personal prophecy does have its place. While in the course of ministering, God can tell you stuff to speak. But if you're a prophet, you need to be sharp. Make sure you know God's voice. Don't confuse it with your own. All right? So now we go back to chapter 4. We're going to go down through here. And after this really in-depth stuff about spiritual verities, then it goes back to more discernible poetry. Verse 13. So they sacrifice upon the tops of the mountains and burn incense upon the hills. Mountains and hills, that's a synonymous A. Under oaks and poplars and elms. Ren taught us about that, right? About under the trees. And also, at the beginning, we heard about that. Under oaks and poplars and elms where they had idolatry. because the shadow thereof is good. Ha! There it is. It's right there in the word that we heard. Therefore your daughters shall commit whoredom or be unchaste, and your spouses shall commit adultery. I will not punish your daughters when they commit whoredom or are unchaste, nor your spouses when they commit adultery. All right? Or themselves, the men, are separated or go apart with whores, and they sacrifice with harlots. Now, this is really interesting here, because verse 14 does not make sense until you understand the spirit of whoredom is spiritual whoredom and idolatry. Because why would God not punish the daughters for premarital sex or for the wives who commit adultery? Well, because that's plain old sex. And while it's still wrong and sinful, make mistake, I'm not saying it's okay, but it's a whole lot less than ritual sex done as part of idolatrous worship. And I know that to be what it's talking about, because that last part of the verse 14, or themselves are separated with whores. The themselves is masculine in Hebrew. So daughters and wives in verse 14, that's feminine. So themselves is talking about the men that separate. They get apart under the nice shade in those trees. They sacrifice with harlots. Temple prostitutes is that word, harlots, in Hebrew. So the last half of the verse is talking about the spirit of whoredom, idolatry, and ritual sex in the worship of false gods. Wow. So, therefore the people that doth not understand shall fall. But then after this comes the next reversal. All right? That whole section continues to chapter 5, verse 15. We don't have time to cover all of that. So the next reversal is chapter 6, verse 1. It begins there. And it's back to Hebrew poetry. Then section 5 is more negative. It's chapter 6, verse 4 through chapter 11, verse 7. And then there's the fifth reversal. That's, again, poetry. You see it's really structured here. Then we get all the way down. Section 6 is more judgment. Hosea 11, verse 12 through chapter 13, verse 16. And then the sixth reversal begins in chapter 14, verse 1. So we'll go there, chapter 14, verse 1. We'll finish up there for tonight. Chapter 14, verse 1. O Israel, return unto the Lord thy God, for thou hast fallen by thine iniquity. Take with you words. Which words? God's words. And turn to the Lord. Because the words of God are what fight the devil. Saying to him, take away all iniquity. So there you have an A, B, A, B. And receive us graciously. That's an intense B. So we will render the calves of our lips. That is the sacrifice of praise on their lips. All right? That's an intense A of returning. Asher shall not save us. We will not ride upon horses. That's a C. Neither will we say any more to the work of our hands, you are our gods. For in thee the fatherless finds mercy. That's a conclusion. Then, I will heal their backsliding. That's a D. I will love them freely. That's an E. For mine anger is turned away from him, That's like loving them. Okay, my anger being turned away. That's a E. And I will be as the dew unto Israel. That's a blessing. That's like healing. That's a D. And he shall grow as the lily. That's an F. And cast forth his roots as Lebanon. That's a G. His branches shall spread. That's a synonymous G. His beauty shall be as the olive tree. It was as the lily before, and an F. Now it's an as olive tree. That's an F. And his smell as Lebanon. That's an I. They that dwell under his shadow shall return. That goes all the way back to D, healing their backsliding. They shall revive as the corn. That's the J. And grow as the vine. That's a synonymous J. The scent thereof shall be as the wine of Lebanon. So it's talking about this. It smells good. That's the smell as Lebanon. That's an I. Then we have a conclusion. Ephraim shall say, after all of this, when they return, what do I have to do anymore with idols? I've heard him and observed him. I'm like a green fir tree, solid. From me is thy fruit found. Who is wise? And he shall understand these things. Prudent, and he shall know them. For the ways of the Lord are right, and the just shall walk in them, but the transgressors shall fall therein. So there we have the book of Hosea. We didn't cover the entire book, but we revealed enough of its structure that'll help you understand it when you work it. Remember, the word interprets itself in the verse, in the context, or the concept has been explained in prior usage. Tonight and in the past few sessions, we've seen the role of structure to help us understand entire books. Structure is a facet of context. The word interprets itself in the context. And now we know a lot more about that. So, bless you.